normally I'll say I'll do a little bit of an intro of how I met Thay. And Thay has been a friend of our community and part of our community since I think around 2010, 2011, 2012, something like that. When we were doing, Brother Chi Sing and I and a few others were doing a weekly meditation group at another community, and Thay was there, and when we went around the room, he said, "You can just call me Z," and so I knew him as Z, and then he wandered into one of my flute classes.
I did.
And he would come visit our community from time to time, and one time when he came to our community, he showed up in a brown robe and was like, "Hey, what's up?" And anyway, so let's welcome Thay tonight.
Thank you, Cornell. Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. I want to tell you a little bit about me before I get into the remarks this evening. As Cornell said, I sat like you're sitting here when I first met Brother Chi Sing, but I had been a practitioner of Buddhist practice, meditation, for about 15 years before that. And I was happy to find this community because my teacher, Thay, who has been my teacher for well over 20 years, wanted me to join a Sangha. And I never quite got why that was important. But I got it once I met this group, this community here. So my Buddhist name is Thich Minh Tien, Thich, much like our friend Thich Nhat Hanh. That Thich or Thay is a word that simply means master, teacher, or monk. You can call any Mahayana monk Thay. I am the abbot of Budding Dharma Temple, which is a small temple in Arlington, Texas. And though we look at ourselves as a Mahayana group with strong leanings toward Thich Nhat Hanh, we also take into account lots of different cultures. When I became a novice in the Zen tradition of the Japanese traditions. And then my teacher switched over to the Mahayana Vietnamese tradition. And we went off wandering Southeast Asia for a little while. I wound up in a temple in Hunan, the Blue Cliffs. And I was ordained in the Chan tradition, which is the Chinese tradition over there. And when I got back here to the States, the Vietnamese high guy, his name was An Zhao, the most venerable An Zhao. He's passed away this last year. He was concerned that my ordination wouldn't be totally recognized here in the States with the Vietnamese. So he said, "We're going to do this all over again." So I got ordained a second time in the Vietnamese tradition. And that was where I got my name, Thich Minh Tien. Minh Tien, Minh is part of my teacher's name. So Minh means bright, and Tien means meditation. So I am the monk of bright meditation. The practice that we do at Budding Dharma Temple would not be recognizable in a lot of other temples. You'd see a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And the reason that we do that is because I have a very strong belief in the Western culture of adopting the Buddhist practices into our culture. Every culture that the Buddhist practices went to changed just a little bit. And so Zen, which is the Japanese concept of, the word Zen actually stands for meditation, was adopted from what came over from northern India with our traditional teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. When it went over to China, it changed from Zen to Chan. Chan also means meditation. And so that was the change that happened then. And of course, in Vietnam, Vietnamese, and here over in the States, we call it Tien, Thien, which also means meditation. So you can see that it changes a little bit. Now, I've gone pretty much all over Texas visiting temples and enjoying very much meeting the people that I do at different temples. However, the difficulty is that I'm a Westerner and I don't speak very good Mandarin. I speak terrible Vietnamese. And so basically what we do is just a lot of bowing to each other. Very respectful, good stuff, but their teachings, their practices are sort of far and distant. And my belief is that to develop what we have in this country requires a touch of Western culture as well. So that's why I say at my temple, we do lots of little things. Some of it I've adopted from here, some of it I've adopted from different Vietnamese cultures that I visited, but mostly we do what we like. We do a lot of singing, chanting, but primarily meditation. So that's who I am. If I could ask our bell master to invite the bell once. May the infinite light of wisdom and compassion so shine within us that the errors and vanities of self may be dispelled. So shall we understand the changing nature of existence and awaken into spiritual peace. So before I get into the actual talk, I have to do some corrections. Anna, who does great work here, I think she's worth her weight in gold. You know, she coordinates who the speakers are going to be and takes our topics and gets ready to publish them just before we have our meeting on Sunday. And I sent her what my topic was going to be and what it was going to be about. And then when I saw it in my email, I thought, did I say that?
My bad too. I was supposed to be proofreader and I just wanted to.
All right, well, you'll be thoroughly punished later, not a problem. But what was published was presence is everywhere when we are mindful of each moment. And presence is nowhere when each present moment becomes either the past or the future in a split second. This talk explores the paradox of time from different perspectives and how Buddhism offers us some insights into the time and the web of the interconnectedness of all. Now, I knew I didn't write that because it's really good. But it wasn't quite what I wrote. What I wrote was, it's going to be a lesson from the Jataka tales, the frog and the scorpion. We are called by the Buddhist teachings to be the best that we can be. The discussion will revolve around the challenges we as sentient beings face in our efforts at times to rise to that calling. The story of the frog and the scorpion may provide some of that insight. So if you came here to hear what that lovely lady in the back wrote, maybe a little bit, I'll throw a little bit of that in. But it's really kind of, we're going to talk a little bit about what I consider to be the nature of who we are. So, how many are familiar with the Jataka tales? Anybody? Nobody. Okay, good. Well, there are about 550 Jataka tales, and they're taken from things that the Buddha may have said sometime in his discourse. And I use the word discourse rather than teachings, because the Buddha didn't teach. The Buddha did discourse, like we're doing here, talking to each other, understanding, asking questions, raising topics. That's what the highlight of our practice is about. It's not about me sitting here and saying, well, I've read lots of books. Not true. I've been taught by some of the best teachers in the country. Some of that's true. But what the strength of it is not what I teach. It's about the discourse that we have with each other. And the Jataka tales are about this concept of discourse. And you'll find it in many spiritual cultures. It existed in the Hindu cultures, which is where the Buddha was born. And the understanding came from a lot of what he was raised with. The Jataka trails are like parables. How many are familiar with the term parable? If you've been raised in the Christian side of this life, or even in the Muslim side of life, parables are very, very frequently expressed. And parables are a story. The story is said to explain or elicit a concept that you want us to have a discourse about. And the discourse of the Jataka tales came over a period, the very first ones were, we argue about when this stuff all occurred. If you are a Pali or a Sanskrit scholar, not, then you may have this argument. I just simply accept that they started writing some of these about 300 to 500 years after the Buddha passed away. And there were people who were trying to figure out, how are we going to share what the Buddha talked to us about in the most simple and understanding way? Remember, the Buddha never wrote anything down, nothing. There are no writings of the Buddha. There are no writings of Jesus. He didn't write anything down either. Those first occurred 200 or 300 years after his death. Muhammad didn't write anything down. Again, it was all taken from what other people heard the teachers say or have discourse about. And so these stories of the Jataka tales are generally relatable to child's fairy tales. And they bring about a point of reference in life that gives us the opportunity maybe to see our teachings a little better. Now, this story, I've heard it many times, but I can't find it in the 550 Jataka stories. I used to have 3 different books that covered the Jataka tales in my library. And when I went looking through them in the temple, I couldn't find any of the books, which means somebody's checked them out and they're in somebody else's possession at the moment, which is what we do at my temple. I have a pretty big library, and people just take books and read them and either pass them on or bring them back. They bring books that they found and contribute to them. And these Jataka tales generally involve the concept of some animals. And they're supposed to relate to what the Buddha talked about when he expressed his understanding. Remember, the Buddha believed in reincarnation. And so they generally express what the Buddha talked about in his previous lives. And the animals involved are many. There's Jataka tales about the tiger. There's Jataka tales about the elephants. There are Jataka tales about the monkeys. They all exist. But the one that I've heard many times involved the scorpion and the frog. But I've also seen it expressed as the scorpion and the turtle. So whichever animal you want to use, that's fine. So the story goes like this. This is expression of a story somewhere that the Buddha told, but somebody related back. There was a river flowing through this very wonderful land. And on one side of the river, many animals lived, including the frog and the scorpion. They lived somewhat in relative peace and harmony with each other because they didn't eat each other normally. And so they were just simply animals and friends of the animal world that they saw all the time. Well, food began to run out on their side. There was just so much going on. But across the river, they could see that animals were eating pretty well. And so the scorpion looked at the frog and said, you know, if we could get across that river, there'd be plenty of food for us to eat. And the frog looked at the scorpion and said, that's true. That's true. Regretfully, you can't swim, but I can because I'm a frog. And the scorpion thought about this and he said, well, maybe we can make a deal. And the deal will be that you will carry me on your back and you will swim us across the river so that we can both have and share in this food. Well, the frog, you know, kind of scratched his head and thought about it for a minute and said, you're a scorpion. And I've seen what you do to other things. And I'm afraid you'll sting me and your venom will kill me. And the scorpion sat there for a moment. And he said, well, I can guarantee you that I wouldn't sting you. You know, we're going to be relying on each other to get across the river. You can do it easily. I can't. If you'll allow me to hop on your back, I promise you, I will not sting you. And so the frog thought about it for a while and said, all right, I believe you. Hop on my back and I'm going to swim across with you on my back and we will go over and we will feast on the food that's on the other side of the river. And so the scorpion scampered over and hopped on the frog's back and the frog jumped in the water and they began to swim. And they got about halfway across and all of a sudden the frog was very aware that something was going on. He had just been stung by the scorpion. And he looked at the scorpion and he said, why did you do that? Now we're both going to die. You can't swim. We're only halfway across and you've now stung me with your venom and we are both going to die. And the scorpion said very sorrowfully, well, it's because it's my nature. And that's the end of the story because they never made it to the other side. Now, one might say, what's the story trying to tell us? Well, if you understand the nature of animals, we have one beautiful one here lying sweetly on the floor. Animals have a specific nature. They want to eat. They don't want to be hurt. They want to be safe. That's the nature of almost all animals. I've got two dogs that have trained me very well. And I have become very understanding of their nature. I don't expect them to understand anything else. But we as human beings, we have a nature also. We also want to eat. We also want to not be eaten. And we also want to be safe. And along with that, because we are a little more evolved, we want to be happy, not suffer quite so much. So we have a nature, a human nature, that brings us an understanding of lots of things in the world. As we encounter things, we begin to learn and understand. As young children, we understood very little. We understood we wanted to eat. We wanted to be warm and safe. We probably wanted our bottoms to be dry. And we wanted to be loved. And that was the extent of our human nature until we began to grow a little bit and we began to develop other parts of our human nature. Now, Thich Nhat Hanh would teach us or discourse with us that we already have a lot of our human nature existing in how he describes it as a garden. And the seeds are already there, but they need to be nurtured in order to become real and relevant for us. This realism happens over time as to how we are treated. If we had wonderful, loving parents and family, maybe our understanding of our human nature and this love and continuous protection was very, very strong. But not all of us are brought up in a very loving and warm family life. Maybe we had parents that fought, or maybe we had brothers and sisters that didn't treat us very well. My brother and I, he's 7 years younger than I am. And we often talk about what a terrible brother I was. My brother has one strong memory of us in our childhood. He had a monkey, a doll monkey that he just loved. And his strongest memory of me is that I pulled the ears off his monkey. Wasn't a very nice brother, apparently. And I don't know where that tendency came off. Maybe I was jealous that my brother had a monkey and I didn't. I don't know what caused me to do that. Maybe I was just a jerk. Very possible. I've had jerk energy pop up periodically in my life. But how we grow into the people that we are, our human nature develops over time by what influences us. We go to school and we're influenced by our teachers and about what we read and what we experience in our world around us from our friends and from their families, from the news, whatever it might be, begins to develop part of our human nature. And what is grown, what becomes real and relevant in our lives and how we interact depends on how we react to this stuff. So if we wanted to be loving and kind and compassionate people, we somehow had to be shown this love and this compassion, this wonderful essence of some of the teachings of the Buddha, and of course, many other great teachers, Jesus being one of them. So this human nature exists. Now, what the Buddha offered to us in his discourse was that we have the opportunity to have another nature. And that other nature that he talked about was called Buddha nature. Every single one of you are already a Buddha to be, an individual ready for your awakening. And your awakening just simply is going to depend on how you nurture it. What do you do to bring about your Buddha nature? When we did the Brahma Viharas, which are considered the four attitudes or the four virtues of Maitri, which is loving kindness, and Karuna, compassion, and Mudita, empathetic joy, and our equanimity, action. Those are all ways that we feed the elements of our Buddha nature. And the discourses that the Buddha was having with the people that came to him to listen to him talk and share with his disciples and with the other people in the crowds that surrounded him was simply what they understood to be available to them all, which was a different discussion that the Buddha was having with them at their time. Remember, the Hindu population was very, very restricted as to who you are. You could be born into the Brahma class, the Brahmins, very high muckety mucks in the Hindu religion. And your life was wonderful, as the Buddha's was when he was born as a prince. He had everything. And then he went outside of his little hometown there that his dad had picked up for him and said, you know, only young people, only pretty people, only well people, only healthy people will be in this area. That's all I want my son to be. And the reason he was afraid of what the Buddha was going to turn out to be was because as a Buddha, as a baby, it was predicted by one of the holy men of that time that he was either going to be a great warrior and king or a holy man. And his dad was only interested in him being a great warrior and king because that was what he was going to hand down to Siddhartha. Well, once he got outside, he saw life was different than what he experienced in his own little world. And he saw people that were aging, people that were sick, people that had died, people that suffered. He saw what the world really was about. And he took that back into his castle, his kingdom, and could never again be comfortable in his mind about what he had seen. And so after about, I don't know, 3-4 years of this trying to figure this out, he said, you know what, I've just got to get out of this world that's been created for me, and I got to experience the real world. And that's when his awakening nature began to arise. And he joined up with some of the best teachers in Nepal, went to the best schools, proved to be one of the top students in the country, and still yet he did not have the answers. And so he also saw in his travels these people called mendicants. And mendicants were people that were trying to find these kind of similar answers, but they were looking for their awakening to arise by torturing themselves, by living without the basic necessities of life, very meager clothes, if any, throwing dirt on themselves and maybe eating just a few pieces of rice every day, torturing their body, you know, hitting themselves with things, laying on beds and nails, things that yogis have been doing for years in India, trying to torture their body into submission so that they could have this awakening. And the Buddha tried to do the same thing. In fact, he was so good at it, he almost killed himself doing it, until a young child saw him and said, hey, mister, what you're doing doesn't look very smart to me. You're almost dying. You haven't eaten anything in so long. Why don't you choose a different way? And now the Buddha nature began to grow. And the Buddha said, you know, I hear what you're saying. I'll eat something. And so they fed him. They had discourse with him. They talked back and forth out of the mouths of babes, right? And the Buddha said, you know what? I'm just going to sit under this tree until I get all the answers that I'm looking for. And that's when the Buddha nature, this awakening, began to blossom. And he sat for a period of time. Who knows how long it was? Some people say it was 8 hours. Some people say it was 8 days. I wasn't there, or if I was, I don't remember. And when he had his awakening, that is when the title of Buddha, which means awakened one, was given to him. And he, at that particular point in time, still had sufferings of his own. He had his human nature like we all do, but he also recognized this swelling nature of the Buddha, the awakening part of his garden, if you will, coming to pass. And it grew so quickly, he understood that it wasn't about having all the riches and great wealth of the world and everything you want. And it wasn't about taking all of that away from yourself. What it was called the middle way. Not too much of this, not too much of that, but find a middle way in life. You know, we are all trying to awaken And we're all trying different ways of doing that. The Buddha strongly encouraged us to find ways of finding our own awakening. He encouraged us through ways of doing different things as well. Sitting meditation, which we did here tonight. Walking meditation, which we did here tonight. If you go to a lot of other types of Buddhist practices, you'll hear lots of chanting. We did some of that when we did the Brahma Viharas. All of these things bring about this mindful way of living. The Buddha set out for us the Noble Eightfold Path, which is all that is required for us, really, for this awakening of the Buddha nature to grow and to become stronger and stronger, so that it takes our human nature when we're angry or when we're jealous or when we're lustful or when we have too much of any one thing, or we want to push our sickness or our disabilities to the side. It teaches us ways of dealing with all of this. It is a beautiful, beautiful practice. You know, I was Catholic for 62 years, and I liked my Catholic faith. I liked what Jesus taught. I just had problems with faith. I had problems with belief. My Buddhist practice requires me to believe nothing. And if you read the discourse of the Buddha's life, when he was laying on his deathbed, even the people that were most closely associated with him were so attached to him that they were afraid of losing him. And, you know, I can just imagine what it was like, the Buddha sitting here going, wow, I've been teaching and discoursing with you for about 40 years, and you still don't get it. And so he had to say to these disciples in the crowds, don't believe anything I've told you. Don't believe anything that will be written about me or the discourses that we have. Don't believe anything that any other teacher tells you. Make it real for yourself. And what does that mean? That means allowing your Buddha nature to come forth and to recognize how real that is. When I decided to put on robes and become a monk, it was because I saw no better way of living. I worked 33 years for the airlines. And when I retired, people said, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? A couple of years later, they saw me in robes and they said, this? This is what you choose? I said, yeah. I couldn't find anything better to do. And so I take this life of service, this life of what we call being a bodhisattva, being someone who is willing to be compassionate, willing to be loving, willing to have empathetic joy for others people's happiness. I take this out into the world as I can. I can't do everything, but I do what I can. I work in the prisons. I'm a chaplain in the hospitals. I run this small little temple. I share with the Sangha there. I share with you just my experiences and understanding. This is not dogma. This is different. This is asking you to cultivate your own nature. And all the ways that we're teaching you or discoursing with you to do that, it's all smoke and mirrors. Meditation is smoke and mirrors. Walking meditation, smoke and mirrors. It allows us to slow down and recognize our Buddha nature. It allows us in meditation to see, wow, I wish I hadn't said that to the grocery clerk this morning. I wish I had been kinder. I wish I had been more loving. I wish I had been more like my Buddha nature shows me I can be. And through meditation, and then through mindfulness, living in a mindful way every moment that you can. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. You know, I had a habit, if you will. My language wasn't always great. And sometimes I used language that wasn't kind. You know, if I drop the coffee cup on the floor, before I can catch myself to say, and catch myself in two ways. One, not to criticize myself for being such a klutz, but also not allowing the anger that's arising because I was a klutz. I want my Buddha nature to come forward and to say, I was just human. I can do better the next time if I pay attention to what I'm doing. That mindful living that's all it is paying attention to how you are living each moment. So I encourage you to honor your Buddha nature, because you got it. It's not something you have to pay for. It's not something that anybody else can give you. It's already there. Recognize it. Also recognize your human nature. Don't hate yourself. Don't criticize yourself. Don't look at yourself as less than when these mistakes in your life happen. Oh, well, there I go being human again. Let me try to walk a little bit closer to being the Buddha, the awakened, that we know we already are. So be not so much the scorpion, be more the frog, who was actually being a loving creature in that story. Now, I like to give something away every time I come, and I didn't know what to give you, but I'd like you to do a metta practice with me. Are you willing to do that? Okay, this is again another smoke and mirrors, guys. This is a practice that I do every day. This is what I do when I get up in the morning as I'm making my coffee. I sing it, but we're going to do it as recitation. I'm going to say something and you're going to repeat it. Okay, y'all willing? Great. If you're not, that's okay. You're just kind of in your human nature. All right, that's okay. So I'd like you to put your right hand over your heart, and I'd like you to put your left hand over that. And in this particular moment, just kind of let your eyes kind of close a little bit. And I'd like you to think that there's a mirror in front of you and that you're viewing yourself. And you're seeing yourself for the wonderful, wonderful Buddha to be that you already are. And I'd like you to repeat after me and say, may I be well.
May I be well.
May I be happy.
May I be happy.
May I know love.
May I be loved.
May I know peace.
May I know peace.
Then I'd like you to take your hands and I'd like you to extend them just a little bit out in front of you, as if you're offering somebody a gift. And I'd like you to see in that mirror, you disappear, and somebody that you recognize that's so easy to love comes into view. And you recognize from your awakened self that that person wants to be happy and to experience the same kind of love that you just wished yourself. And so we're going to say to them, may you be well.
May you be well.
May you be happy.
May you be happy.
May you know love.
May you know love.
May you know peace.
May you know peace.
And then I'd like you to extend your hands out just a little bit further. And this time, that loving person that you were talking to before disappears from the mirror. And who walks in? But somebody you don't recognize. Maybe it was the person you walked by in the grocery store. Maybe it was somebody in a class that you do, but you don't know them. This is somebody you just don't know, but their Buddha nature and their human nature wants the same thing that you want. And so we're going to wish them, may you be well.
May you be well.
May you be happy.
May you be happy.
May you know love.
May you know love.
May you know peace.
May you know peace.
And now I'd like you to extend your hands out just a little bit further. And that unknown person disappears from the mirror, and in pops the vision of another individual. Except you know this individual. This person, you find it so hard to love. This is somebody that can make your anger appear, or your jealousy, or whatever it is, but it's feelings that you wish you hadn't exhibited with this individual. But there's something about them, and something about yourself that clashes. And to this person, I want you to say most sincerely, may you be well.
May you be well.
May you be happy.
May you be happy.
May you know love.
May you know love.
May you know peace.
May you know peace.
And then we're going to open our arms as wide and as high as we can, as you're comfortable in doing. And now I want you to envision this whole wonderful world that we live in, the cosmos, everything that creeps and crawls and flies and swims in this world. Our beautiful earth, all of its minerals and rocks and mountains and trees. And let us say to all of this, may all be well.
May all be well.
May all be happy.
May all be happy.
May all know love.
May all know love.
May all know peace.
May all know peace.
And now gather all of that, what we call metta or loving kindness, back to yourself. And your right hand on your heart, left hand over that. Give yourself a hug. And recognize again one thing that we understand the Buddha said in his discourse, which is, of all things created, you are most deserving of your love. And say to yourself again, may I be well.
May I be well.
May I be happy.
May I be happy.
May I know love.
May I know love.
May I know peace.
May I know peace.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. That, my friends, my brothers and sisters, my fellow Buddhas to be, that is called metta practice. And any time that you feel your human nature overtaking your metta, overtaking your Buddha nature, allow yourself to use the metta practice. You drive down the street and the person doesn't use their turn signals. You can offer one type of signal, which is your hand signal, which maybe isn't a good idea. Or you can simply say, may you be well. May you be happy. May you know love. May you know peace. May you learn how to use turn signals. And you'll notice that that anger or whatever was arising from your human nature will continue to go down. And this Buddha nature, this loving kindness, this loving nature that we naturally all have, will come in full.